Hi guys, welcome to the Solution Architect channel. And to speed up this video, I'm just going to quickly say what we're going to do in this video. We're going to create a table and a database on MySQL, and then we're going to create the code, WebAPI in .NET Core 3.1, and then we're going to test it and link it up, connect it with a connection string to MySQL on our Linux machine, and then we're going to test it afterwards using Postman. So let's jump into this. So we are inside MySQL Workbench and connected to our MySQL server on Linux Ubuntu. The previous video showed you how to do the connection, and I'm just going to simply running a query here. There's several ways of creating a database. You can just go in here and say create a new schema. You can manually update it. I've already got a script that I created. I'm just going to paste that script into this query here. And what this script will do, it will create a database called Architects Shop, and then we'll use that Architects Shop and then create a table underneath that that schema Architects Shop. So we'll go ahead and run this script and then create our schema. Just simply click on the execute. Okay, so it created the and I'll leave the link for the SQL script in the description below. And this now created the schema. So you need to refresh all here, and you'll see we've got our schema up here. We've got our schema, our table called product. All our columns is in there. So everything seems to be fine. So that is how you create your table on SQL Server. So very simple script. We're going to create a the next step is to create the API. Okay, so now we're in Visual Studio Code and ready to create our application. Go to Terminal and click on New Terminal. Okay, so I just went to my folder. I'm using PowerShell for this. Some of the other commands I will use the bash script, the bash CL command line. So, but we want to first create our application. It's a .NET new. It's a web API that we're creating right now. Say output. That's the output folder that it will go to, and it will also call the say MySQL web API. Enter, and that will create the web API for us. And I will pause here and come back when it's done. It's running a little bit slow because I've got a lot of things open on my desktop. Okay, so it's done, created. So let's go to that directory folder, and you've got all of this inside here. And what I like to do is just go to my Explorer and open the folder where that is. And this is my SQL web API, and that's the folder. And we've got all our apps here. So what I'm going to do here, because by default it created your controller for you, the weather forecast, but we don't need that. We're going to create our own controller. So I'm going to delete this, and also going to delete this weather forecast model. We don't need that. Okay, now let's go back to terminal. And we want to add a few packages. So the first package we want to add is .NET. Remember what we're trying to do here is we want to try and access our MySQL server. Seriously, I'm just going to copy and paste that over. So Microsoft.Entity Framework Core, we need that. So add that package. And if you're not too familiar with this process, what's happening, if you open up the project file, it will add it to the project file as a reference. So there's three packages we want to add here. This is the first one. And then we want to add the MySQL package. So remember, I'm running 3.1 core. And the next package is .NET. If you go to your terminal down here, add package MySQL.data.entity framework core. Now, just to note quickly, there is a few others that people can use. I'm using this one because it's working for me. There's Pomelo out there and Divart. I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly. But just run that. For this purposes, we will use the MySQL.data.entity framework core. And after that one is done, the last one is Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.tools. Okay, it's going to take a bit long. I'll pause this and come back. Okay, so last thing to add here is the tools. And always when you add it, packages, say .NET Restore. Okay. Now what we want to do is I want to create a new folder here. So we've got a controllers folder, and I like to separate my models from my controllers. So we'll add a new folder called models, and we'll add our model inside here. So after we've created our model folder, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run. I'm not sure if this is going to run on. I have some issues with my PowerShell. It should be able to run here, but we can try it. Now my face is in the way there. Is .NET EF DB context. Now in my previous videos, and I'll probably put a link up there where I actually installed the EF commands. .NET EF DB context scaffold. So I'm going to use scaffolding. This is my server name, my port I'm using, the database I created, my password. Well, it's normally not a password I would use, but just for demo purposes. And then the MySQL data.entity framework core. You reference this, and then the output is models. So you want to from the database, actually create a model. And this is what this command is doing. Now, I apologize if I'm going to run this. This might run an error, but then I switch to bash, and it actually works there. And I think I've got a install problem, and I don't want to really take everything off and redo everything on my desktop. So yeah, this is the issue. So we'll change this over to bash. Git bash, and just so you just set it as default, and you just go to bash, and it's good to go from PowerShell to bash, and then you're in the correct folder there. So I'm just going to run that same command inside here, .NET EF DB context scaffold, the connection string, and this, and the models. Let's hope everything runs fine. And that should connect to your server, make sure everything's up and running, and then create the model for you. And it will also create the DB context that you need to be able to connect to your database. So you'll see things start popping up inside models here. if everything works fine. Okay, so go into models here. You see there's now a architect shop context, and we'll change this because this is really bad practice. I will take it out completely from my on configuration and move it to my startup, but and then go to products. And I like to add, it's good practice to add your key up here. So I'm going to do that quickly. It's just really good practice to add this. I don't know why it's your ID here is the key, and it's database generated. You'll see it's underscored here because I didn't. The easiest way to do this is to add the using. Click on this, add using on top there for data annotations, and the next one is data annotation schema. The next step, what we want to do is then create our DB context. So we'll do that quickly. Just move my face down here again. We'll go to startup and go to configuration services and add just down your okay, so this needs to be referenced from the models, and this needs to reference the Microsoft Entity Framework Core. And to be able to get your connection string, you need to add a connection string. So we haven't done that yet. So go to appsettings.json file. And I'm just going to copy and paste what I have already to add a connection string inside here. So this is better practice than that came out of the box there. So you put it into your configuration, your app settings. And then we go to the context here, and we can delete this on configuration completely because we don't need that now. Okay, so now everything should be fine, and we have our DB context. We need a context, and we need our model to be able to, and on startup here, this will now just add the configuration on startup, so you need to have it on the configuration services on your startup. Okay, now we want to create our controller, and I'm going to create this manually. Products controller. There is ways to use the auto-generate. You don't need to do that, especially when it's just you're going to do a web API. But I've pre-populated this. I created this. I'll take you through. So what I've done for products controller. I've done my test project. Now I just want to make sure I can reference the right namespace. Okay, so we've got our models, everything in all the references inside here. Also use link. Now just quickly, I've added a logger here. Not that I'm using it right now, but it's good to have a logger. And I reference my context here, and on the constructor I create the logger and the context, new instance of the context, so I can use it within whatever I want to use it. Then I've got a HTTP GET. Just on top here, this is, if you're not familiar with APIs, you need to say this is API controller, this is my controller, and I'm just going to reference. Some people like to have API/insight. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you prefer, it doesn't matter. So let's So we've got a get in here, which just will get a list of products. So it will reference the context.product.list and will return that. And this is an asynchronous call. Then we've got the get the product by a specific ID. So you'll pass an ID through on that. Remember, this is RESTful services. You'll pass the ID, and then the next step here is to get the product by ID. Just find that product by ID. If the product is not, if it's null, then it's not found. Otherwise, you'll return the product, and you'll see here the action result returns the product inside this return value. And then we've got the post, which will create a product for us. So you'll pass through the product object, and the product object will then just add the product to your, I probably should put in some sort of validation inside here if it's not created, but anyway, this will just return the product ID. So it will create the product, save it, and the next one here is we have a put. So HTTP put, which means that for this product ID, I'm just doing an update. So doing an update of that, and it's checking the state of the product, and then this will do the update on the product. If it's complete, it will just return nothing. If it found an error, an exception, it will throw that exception to the user. The last one here, okay, product exists. If it's not found, I've got a separate method for that just check to see, does that product exist? If it's yes, if it's true, then it will turn a true from product exists. The last one here is delete the product. You'll pass through the ID. This will delete the product and remove it. So this is a complete CRUD for our web API. And the way we're going to test this, now first what we want to do is we want to .NET build this and see if we've got any errors. Okay, and then we can say build, .NET run. And I used Postman. So I'm going to open Postman now, and we can go to Postman to test if our web API is working. So I've opened Postman here, and so inside Postman here, you can select, now because this is RESTful, all of these options are available. And what we've created a get, a post, a put, and I think we created a delete. So first of all, we want to get. So this is where it's hosted at the moment on localhost with port 5000 and products. So this is our controller name, products. So send that, and that will return empty. So we've got nothing in our database. Now let's go a put. So we've got a put inside here. How it works. Now remember, we want to, first of all, the header, we need to tell Postman that the header content is in a JSON format. So the content type, the key is content type, and the value, so you only have one header that you're passing through. So the content type and the value is application/JSON. And then on the body side is your JSON script. Now remember, we don't pass the ID because the ID is a key and it's auto-generated. Now that's really important to note, that you don't pass that ID through. So the only values, and exactly the same as your database name, is your name, your code, your price, and your image. And we're going to pass that through and create a, now I think this might be wrong. We need to have uppercase, because if I'm correct, you go to our products. Yep, this is how it's spelled. So just make sure that you spell it the same way, and let's post it. And let's come back with the ID 6. You see I've played around earlier. Now let's go back to our get, and if I say get, and this will get back my first record. And I'm going to open up Workbench. And I've got already a inside Workbench, MySQL Workbench, and select this and run, execute this, and we'll get our record back. So you can see the API is working. I'm going to just add another one just to make sure. Test. Just change this to different price and say send. ID 7, and let's go back to our get. And we've got now 2 records returning. Inside SQL, just my Workbench again, click there, and we've got 2 records inside MySQL. So the API is working. And the next steps would be to add the code that we need to be able to host this web API on Apache. By default, ASP.NET Core is using Kestrel as our web host, and we want to deploy it on Apache, and we want to host that web API on Apache and not Kestrel. So what we're going to do is, because ASP.NET is hosting by default using Kestrel, but there's some code changes that we have to make, and I'll do this in my next video to show you guys what is the changes that we need to allow a reverse proxy like Kestrel to pass that API and to host that API on Apache, and we'll do that in the next video. Thank you very much for watching, and please come back in the next video so we can get into the detail.